Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Green Chemistry Commitment Info Session. My name is Juliana. I'm very excited to be here with you today. This is a program that we have a lot of people, really cool people in it. So in here in the Zoom link today, you also have the higher education team. You have Monica. You have also Natalie and also Chloe, who will be here with us. So just a reminder that this meeting is recorded and all of the information about the green chemistry commitment and also the recording will be sent to you after this is done. So without further ado, I'm not going to talk anymore because I'm going to give you what you came here for, which is to listen to John Warner. So I'm thrilled to introduce you to this amazing human being who's going to talk to you about green chemistry, education, research, and all of the things he does. So John, he's the co-founder and he's part of the Green Chemistry Commitment Advisory Board of Beyond Benign. He's also the CEO and president of the Technology Greenhouse. And John is dedicated to inventing things that work in the real world with green chemistry. So he has over 300 patents. He has a bunch of corporations. He co-founded the field of green chemistry, over 120 publications. He has received the, I don't know how to say this, but Wilhelm von Hoff Medal, the Presidential Award for Excellence in Science Mentoring, the Perkin Medal, and he holds academic positions in universities all over the world. So career check. But besides that, John is also an amazing human being who is dedicated to, he's passionate about green chemistry, and we know that he abdicates of a lot of other things to be here talking to us today. So it's a pleasure, and I'm thrilled to have you, John, here. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen because the floor is yours. So thank you for being with us today.
Well, thank you very much, Juliana, and thank you, Beyond Benign, for allowing me an opportunity to share on Earth Week. It's not Earth Day, but it's Earth Week, and so very, very happy and honored to be here. I'm looking at the list of participants, and there are some friends that we've known each other for a long time, but what I'm very excited about, there's a lot of new names of people that I haven't met before, and so I'm thrilled to be able to share some thoughts with you about the green chemistry challenge and green chemistry in general. Because there's a lot of new faces, my intention today is to first give a little bit of a background of what exactly green chemistry is and kind of be unambiguous, because I think the problem sometimes is people don't realize just how well defined the field of green chemistry is. And so I want to just make sure that we're all got solid footing and we really understand what it is to explain where it came from. So thank you for giving me this chance. Now, if the magic of technology works, I'm about to share my screen. And so if somebody acknowledges, yes, John, indeed, you are sharing your screen, that will be great. Am I sharing my screen?
Yes, John, indeed, you're
Am I in
sharing your screen.
presentation mode?
Not, yes, you are, John. Thank you.
It is a good day. All right. So thank you all. So again, I start all of my presentations by saying I don't claim to have any gifted insight. I do not have all the answers to the world's problems. If I ever come off sounding presumptuous, like, oh, look at this pompous windbag talking about this, that, and the other thing, that is not where I'm coming from. I have lived the life of a chemist for over 40 years. I've come to see things in a certain way, and with a bit of vulnerability, I'm going to share that with you. But if it ever sounds like I'm saying, this is what you must believe, there's enough other people that will take that role. I'm just here to say, this is what works for me, and I hope some of it makes sense for you. And I'm open to any kind of conversations that people want to have. We live in a world right now where chemistry is scary to most of society. It's the monster underneath the bed that's going to jump out and bite us at night. Open up the newspaper, turn on the radio, look on the internet, and we're just inundated with this is bad, this is scary, this is toxic. It's like, who in their right mind would want to be a chemist today? And this is a problem because we desperately need chemistry, right? But it's almost like the game whack-a-mole, you know, the game where the little animal comes up and you hit it and another one comes up and it comes faster and faster and faster and faster. Well, we chemists, we like our moles, right? 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd. The American Chemical Society, in fact, even has a mole as a mascot. So we like our moles, all right? But we're playing whack-a-mole when it comes to chemistry, right? We hear about climate change, whack. We hear about bisphenol A, whack. We hear about PFAS, whack. We hear about nanoparticles, whack. We hear about ocean plastics, whack. And we're exhausted. We're wrapping ourselves around the issue, trying to understand it. But before we can really get to the bottom of it, another issue comes and another. And in the back of our minds, we're asking ourselves, is this serious? Is this hype? And if we, chemists, the only people who are trained to understand the relationship between molecular structure and how a material behaves, if we're confused, what is the rest of the society doing? And so I feel that this isn't a game. This is important stuff. But, let's accept that there are molecules out there that are endocrine disruptors, that there is technologies that are contributing to climate change, that there are materials that we're using that are persistent and bioaccumulative, that we have, cosmetics that are using carcinogens, and that there's additives in plastics that cause birth. Let's just accept that this stuff is happening. No one wants it to happen. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, oh, if I can have a red dye that sticks to a fabric and doesn't fade light, and if I could have it be a little bit carcinogenic, that would be cool. So all of this negative stuff is never what we want to have happen. So maybe we're not asking the right questions. All right, maybe instead of asking, is this toxic? Is this hazardous? Is this a problem? Maybe the higher level thing is, why would a chemist make a hazardous material in the first place? Isn't that fundamental? No one wants these hazards, so why do we make them? So maybe instead of talking about how we make molecules, we should first talk about how do we make chemists? Okay. And so I'm not a historian, I'm not a sociologist, I can't quote the history of chemistry, but I became a chemist. Maybe there's something instructive in that path that I followed that might be useful to this conversation. All right. And so if you notice the absence of my accent, it's because I come from the Boston area. So the way I sound is very Bostonian. In fact, people who know accents actually will recognize not only am I Boston, but I'm a city south of Boston called Quincy, Massachusetts. Now, Quincy, Massachusetts is an interesting place. It has two presidents of the United States are from Quincy, Massachusetts, John Adams and John Quincy Adams. In my opinion, the greatest chemist who ever lived is from Quincy, Massachusetts. R.B. Woodward, my personal hero. R.B. Woodward got the Nobel Prize for the synthesis of vitamin B12 in 1965. Had he lived longer, he would have certainly got a two, maybe even three more Nobel Prizes, synthetic methodologies, the Woodward-Hoffman rules. And so, but he passed away, and you can't get the Nobel Prize posthumously. But he's from the city of Quincy, and in fact, he went to the same high school as I did. Wow, that's cool. But what's interesting is you gotta understand, I didn't grow up destined to be a chemist. I'm not someone who, when they were 10 years old was playing with chemicals or things like that. I come from a huge Sicilian German family. Had, all my family were carpenters, plumbers, electricians. We were tradespeople, didn't know anything about college, nothing about the stuff. In fact, when I had math in my high school in the second floor, I thought that was higher education because I went up a set of stairs. I didn't know what all this stuff was, but my friends were going to college. And so I said, well, maybe I'll go to college. So I came home one day and I announced to my parents that I was going to go to UMass Boston. And the thing is, I was not as a scientist, as a music major. Okay. And so, oh my God, what did this guy do? And so I worked full time, 40 hours a week in the construction industry, paid my own tuition, and went to school as a music major. But I played in a band, and the name of the band was, wait for it, The Elements. This had nothing to do with carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen. It was a Rubik's Cube, a glass ball. Hey, it was the late 70s. Those were our elements. And we were doing pretty well. We were playing in the best, actually worst dives in Boston, but we were playing 3 nights a week. Actually had a recording contract with recording in the studio. And disaster hit, and the drummer of the band ended up getting leukemia. And over the course of 6 months, he passed away. So here I am, a young kid, a music major, playing in a band, and I'm having this existential crisis. I've just lost my friend, my relationship to music. It's kind of in a fuzzy, weird state. All right. And so at the University of Massachusetts, a music major still has to have a core requirement. Had to take a foreign language, had to take math, had to take a science. Oh my God, I had to take a science. Well, I kind of like biology, mitosis, meiosis, genetics. That was kind of cool. And I kind of like physics, astronomy, and subatomic particles. So I was like, oh, should I take biology? Should I take physics? And in a moment of inspiration, I added them up, divided by two, and said, I'll take chemistry. Not because I had a particular interest in chemistry, but I felt it was some kind of a compromise. So here I am in the teaching lab and an undergraduate, and just as a non-chemistry major, taking a class in chemistry. And one day this professor comes into the lab. He looks at me, sees a music major, walks on by, and he goes to the student next to me. And Professor Jean-Pierre Anselme says to the student next to me, would you like to do research in my lab? I overheard the conversation and I said, can I come? And I followed them into the research lab. When I got into the research lab, everything changed in my life. All my life, I thought there were two types of people. There were artists and there were scientists. And because I was marginally acceptable in music, I must be an artist. But when I realized that chemists created things, they made things, they designed things, I imagined ramming my brain full of electrodes and composing a piece of music on a piano keyboard or designing a molecule. I bet you the same neurological activity happens. That creativity is not art. It's not science. It's something far more human. And once I understood that and internalized that, I fell in love with chemistry. And very quickly, as an undergraduate, published 5 papers in journals and realized, hey, I'm pretty good at this thing called chemistry. Well, because I lost my friend to cancer, I decided I'm going to go into cancer research. And I go to Princeton University and work with this amazing professor, E.C. Taylor. Just I've been so blessed to have so many amazing mentors in my life. But Professor E.C. Taylor ended up publishing over a dozen papers on the synthesis of these dihydrofolate reductase, thymidylate synthase, GR transformalase inhibitors, and really got into this thing. And interestingly enough, this chemistry ultimately became the drug Alimta, sold by the Eli Lilly company. All right. And so, wow, that's kind of cool. And so, a lot of people worked on this. I just played a very small role, but it was kind of cool to see something real world. And just to show the strained relationship between science and society, in 2002, I lost my mom to cancer. She was receiving a version of the drug that I had helped design 15 years earlier. Okay. And so, it's interesting. If you go to the Princeton campus now today, you'll find this Taj Mahal of a chemistry building built entirely on the proceeds from this one drug. And like I said, I just played a very small role, but I actually am the signature on the research disclosure. And so it's kind of neat to have that little piece of history. So here I am. I'm a graduate student at Princeton. I'm about to graduate. Interesting enough, a few universities had approached me to see if I would be interested in being an assistant professor there and whether or not I would be interested. So I was assuming I'm going to go into academia. When one day, a guy from the Polaroid Corporation, the instant photography company, this guy named Lloyd Taylor, he comes and he brings me to lunch. And at lunch, he offers me the job in exploratory research at Polaroid. Now you got to understand, in the late 1980s, Polaroid was the coolest place to be as an organic chemist. Okay, Bell Labs had kind of faded away, and Polaroid emerged as the be all end all. And he says, "Oh, you want to go?" And I go, dude, I'm a medicinal chemist. I'm going into academia. He told me how much he was going to pay me. I said, when do I start? And all of a sudden, I'm an industrial chemist working at Polaroid. Edwin Land is one of the most famous inventors in history. He had more patents than Thomas Edison at this point. He got the Perkin Medal in 1974. How cool is that? Then they gave the Perkin Medal to me, so really, how cool can that be? I realized that I'm pretty good at this stuff, and within 4 or 5 years, filed about 50 patents in medical diagnostics and coding technology and all these different science and technology things. And I just cranking out chemistry after chemistry after chemistry and just really doing this thing. And you got to ask yourself, what would a medicinal chemist do at a place like Polaroid? As a medicinal chemist, I'm used to working in bags of water, right? A cell is really just a little bag of water, and everything is at room temperature, ambient pressure. Water is the solvent. Now I find myself at a manufacturing company where everything is at high temperature, high energy, harsh reagents. And so I said, what is the difference between biology and chemistry? Because biology outperforms what we humans can do and how it makes its molecules and what it makes. So I realized that in biology, there's a lot more entropic control of processes than enthalpic controls. I actually feel that we humans have an enthalpy delta H bias, but nature has an entropy delta S bias. And so I realized that there's got to be a different way. So one thing led to another, and I came up with this field of science called non-covalent derivatization, where essentially it's organic, I call it like organic metallurgy, where I'll take organic molecules, construct phase diagrams, and control the physical and chemical properties of molecules, not by doing methyl ethyl propyl butyl phenyl, but by instead combining molecules and angling the hydrogen bonding just right, getting the pi interactions just right, and fine-tuning properties by doing that. I'm such a nerd. The license plate of my car is NCD for non-covalent derivatization. My first patent came out in 1991. 20 years later, the pharmaceutical industry, the FDA, started with the regulatory guidelines for this kind of chemistry. I'm actually on the advisory panel for that. And so I started doing this weird chemistry called non-covalent derivatization at Polaroid. And a lot of my inventions went to large-scale manufacturing. Well, in the United States, when a company wants to manufacture something, they don't just do it, you have to get EPA approval. Back then and still today, it's called a low volume exemption, a pre-manufacturing notification. This is before the internet, so we had to fill bankers' boxes with multiple copies of a 300-page thing and ship it down to Washington, D.C. We waited and we waited and we waited. And the EPA was struggling. They go, oh, small particles, are you crazy? Molecular complexes, are you high? Polaroid ended up putting me on an airplane and sending me to Washington, D.C. to explain this technology to the EPA. All right, so now maybe one of the first times in my life I'd been on an airplane. I'm at the EPA's Office of Pollution Prevention and Toxics. I'm holding a briefcase of overhead transparencies and a little bit scared, but also a little bit like, "Arr." And so I go and I meet the branch chief of the Office of Pollution Prevention and Toxics, this guy named Paul Anastas. Wait a minute, I know him. Back when I was at UMass, remember the kid that I followed into the research lab when I was a music major? I've known him since I was 11 years old. In fact, was playing in a band that kind of sounds like Tower of Power. At that time, his older brother Nick, there's me on the keyboard, my older brother, the guy playing guitar in this band here. If you've ever been to Las Vegas, the show Legends of Rock, the dude who plays Rod Stewart is him. Has nothing to do with this talk. I just thought you'd find that cool. Well, anyways, I'm at the EPA and I say, wait a minute. Polaroid used to synthesize these things with all these different solvents and energies and things like that. And now we have a new process that's aqueous, non-toxic, environmentally benign. And you're giving me a hard time. Why? And it turns out that the way the EPA does regulatory processes, when you submit something, they go and look at everything they've already approved. And if what you have submitted looks like something they already approved, they go, okay, good, approved. But if it's different, there's not really a protocol. It's like, okay, now what do we do? This is new, this is different. And I kind of got a little bit upset. I said, okay, so even though this is better on every way, it's different, and you're going to give me a hard time because it's new and different. Isn't anything better for human health and the environment by definition going to be new and different? And if our regulatory construct makes it hard to do things that are new and different, aren't we working in on orthogonal places? Shouldn't the EPA instead be promoting things that are better? Okay, so I'm having this very sophisticated conversation at the EPA, very intellectual, very much about, industry's needs, regulatory processes, and very antiseptic conversation about this. All right. At the same time, my career is going really, really well. I've gotten promotion after promotion. I've gotten awards. They did a story of me in Celebrity Magazine, Boy Genius inventing all these things, got all these patents, all these awards. My head is this big. I am the greatest scientist who ever lived. And disaster comes again, this time even worse. I lose my 2-year-old son, John, to a birth defect. My son, John, was born with a disease called biliary atresia, where his liver was detached from his intestines. He couldn't metabolize water insoluble nutrients, and he got surgery at death and at birth, and at 2 years old, we lost him. Lying in bed the night of my son's funeral, I'm looking at the ceiling and I'm asking myself, I wonder if something I touched in the lab caused my son's birth defect. I wonder if, heaven forbid, something that I got an award for caused his disease and ultimate death. I didn't feel like some amazing chemist. I felt something's missing in my life as a chemist. And you got to understand, it's not the answer to the question that was driving me crazy. My anguish came from the reality that I couldn't answer the question. I'm saying to myself, but wait a minute, I'm a chemist. I'm one of the few people on the planet that have been given the gift of making new molecules. Shouldn't part of who I am be how do I anticipate this stuff? And so I started thinking this. There are books coming out around that time, Our Stolen Future, about the impact of industrial chemicals on society. Here it is at this point in my life, probably synthesized over 2,500 brand new molecules with these hands. All right. And I realized 4 years of undergraduate, 3.5 years of graduate school, never had a class that taught me what makes a molecule toxic. I never had a seminar, never had a discussion about the how do you anticipate impacts on human health and the environment. How could I be such a successful industrial chemist and have literally no idea how molecules can hurt humans or the environment? So I start looking. It turns out there's higher incidence of certain types of tumors in professional chemists, elevated breast cancer mortality among professionals. There's all these reports. How is it possible that I've never had a discussion, never had a class, never had a seminar, certainly never had a test? And so I realized that this is an important thing. And what I looked at is like every year, just in the United States, we graduate 15,000 undergraduates in chemistry. 3,000 master's degrees, 3,000 doctoral degrees. In 2004, more women started becoming chemists than men. What could be more important to the field of chemistry than first do no harm, first learning how do you anticipate negative impacts on human health and the environment? But I realized, especially back in 1991, 1992, to get a degree in chemistry, no university required any demonstration and knowledge of molecular mechanisms of toxicity or environment. Just not part. Yes, it existed in the custodial way of doing chemistry. We might have a workshop on how to label waste, how to wear gloves and stuff like that, but it never makes it to the classroom as part of what it means to be a molecular scientist. Right? So why do we have these materials that hurt human health? This isn't an epic battle of good and evil between chemistry and society. For some strange reason, there is a missing element in chemistry. There is this missing component of how do you add to these things. And so we have a textbook called Analytical Chemistry. We have a textbook called organic chemistry. We have a textbook called physical chemistry. We have, through the Western style of education, the reductionist approach, we have all these compartmentalized units that teach chemistry. But do we have something to talk about this? And I realized, no. So, Martin, can you imagine if Dr. Martin Luther King said, I have a nightmare? No one is going to be motivated by the fear and the scare. People are dying. This is bad. The climate change. But here is the opposite. Now we can turn this around and have a hopeful message that if we teach students and learn how to do this, we can start changing the world and stop making this stuff. And so Paul and Astus and I realized that the world needed a science. It didn't need a social movement. It didn't need some kind of a social philosophy. It needed a mechanistic science. And what does this mechanistic science have? It has journals, it has textbooks, it has classes, it has conferences, it has workshops. And so that is the birth of green chemistry. An industrial chemist working at Polaroid and a regulatory scientist working at the EPA, realizing that we needed another body of science to insert into the vast lexicon of chemistry so that when people invent things, we can utilize a set of principles that reduce or eliminate the use or generation of hazardous substances in the design, manufacture, and application of chemical products. And what I think is so important here is that, this book, there's this book is okay, but what's important about this book is that there's an entire chapter. What is green chemistry? There's an entire section, the definition. So unlike so many things in sustainability where we're not quite sure what it means, this thing for 25, 26 years has been a very well-defined thing, and there's a very precise definition. But if you want more, there ends up being 12 principles that expand. And so the way I look at this is that if you have all these social issues, climate change, plastics in the ocean, environmental justice, economic disparities, all these social things, how does a chemist participate? How do we translate the social issues into mechanistic chemistry? How can we superimpose activation energies, hydrogen bond distances, protecting groups, and take the tools of molecular chemistry and translate them into addressing these social issues? And that's the point of green chemistry. Okay, so green chemistry is, yes, it has this safer and more sustainable attribute to it. But there's another important point that for green chemistry to succeed, it has to be used. So a journal article isn't green chemistry. Me giving this talk isn't green chemistry. Green chemistry is the active removal of hazard from society. So the technology actually has to work. It has to have performance. No one's going to buy a cleaner that doesn't clean just because it's green. It's got to still clean. So we've got to have excellent performance. We have to have appropriate cost. This can't just be for wealthy people. This has to be for everybody. So we have to invent the technologies that work in our economic model. So if you have a technology that works better than an incumbent technology, costs better than an incumbent technology, and oh, by the way, ticks these sustainability boxes, now you have green chemistry. If you accept that definition, better performance, better cost, and oh, by the way, better for human health and the environment, who wouldn't want it? All right. So the problem here isn't desire. Everyone wants it. The question is, do we train our next generation of chemists or the existing generation to address these things? If we don't have the fundamental training when we learn chemistry, then all we can do is wonder. But if we change the way we teach chemistry and bring this into the curriculum, now all of a sudden we can start inventing things. Okay, so realizing this at the height of my industrial career, I ended up leaving Polaroid and I went to the University of Massachusetts, became full tenured professor of chemistry in Boston and full tenured professor of engineering at UMass Lowell. So kind of lived in both worlds. And my friends and I, we created the world's first PhD program in green chemistry in 2000. So it's a long time ago now. 20, almost it's going to be 25 years pretty soon. And so this had everything in the chemistry program but added a one semester course in mechanistic toxicology, added a one semester class in environmental mechanisms, added a one semester course in law and policy, but also about product design. How do you invent technologies? And so I had a handful of other things. What's interesting is over the next 12 years, about 150 students passed through this program at different levels. The average time it took one of these students to get a job, average 150 students, 2 days. The longest any student spent looking for a job was 2 weeks because she turned down the first couple job offers. I'm still getting phone calls, 25 years later. John, do you have any students coming out of this program? Because the world, we're generating beautiful chemists worldwide. But if you think about it, we're all learning from the same textbook. We're reading the same journals. We go to the same conferences. So it doesn't really matter where someone gets a degree in chemistry. It's kind of universal. But if that chemist also knows something about toxicity, environmental impact, that is seen as the most priceless thing. It's not going to replace being an excellent chemist. You got to actually know the tools of chemistry too. But if you know this on top of it, it's exactly what industry, what the world needs. Because the way I look at it, of all the products and processes that we have in our society today, I would argue probably only about 10% are truly sustainable. 90% have some issues with them. Now, if we find some low-hanging fruit, maybe move something over here or do some little clever things, we're going to be able to get about another 10, 15%. But right now in 2024, I would argue that 75, 80% of the technologies haven't been invented yet. And this is something that society has to understand. Again, this isn't some epic battle of good and evil. If you accept my definition, better performance, better cost, oh, by the way, better for human health and the environment, who's not going to want that? And so the crisis here is not of desire. The crisis is of ability. We all get it. But if chemists are being taught the way they were being taught 30 years ago, and they don't have the skill set to address these issues, then all we can do is complain. All right. This isn't the birth of ethics. People who have never heard of green chemistry, of course they care about human health and environment. This isn't an aha, we should care. People have always cared. But how have chemists cared? The way we have as chemists traditionally cared about this is we say to ourselves, chemistry must be toxic. If you're going to be a chemist, you must embrace the reality that we work with dangerous stuff. But it's okay because we wear gloves to protect our skin. We wear masks to protect our lungs. We wear goggles to protect our eyes. In factories, we install filters and smokestacks to protect the air, the land, and the sea. We can work with toxic material as long as we protect people from being exposed to it. So risk has two components, and throughout history, we have always focused on mitigating exposure. Green chemistry is a revolution because it's saying if we shift, not entirely, but we shift some of the focus on the intrinsic hazard, now we have things that are just going to be intrinsically safe. And there's two things here. When you mitigate exposure, first, it always comes at great cost. You have to pay for the gloves and the masks and the goggles and the lawyers and everything else. But the other thing is that inevitably something is going to go wrong. That first slide when I showed all those headlines, bet you if you ask people, man, you're working with some hazardous material, is that okay? They'll say, yeah, no problem. We've got the gloves and the mask and the goggles. Stuff happens. It's called entropy. All right. So the revolution that is green chemistry, that if instead we invent a material that's intrinsically hazardless and we reduce the intrinsic hazard, if some tanker truck is going through a city, hits a bump, explodes and spills, instead of getting body bags, we get a broom. All right. Now, we can't snap our fingers and do this overnight. Chemical enterprise has been around for over 200 years. Green chemistry's just emerged on the scene. So it's going to take decades and decades of work. We're going to have to work to move this ball forward. But we've got to agree that we've got to do it. All right. Industry got this. Interesting enough, most companies have green chemistry programs. They realize they have a regulated hazardous material or a non-regulated non-hazardous material. All the costs are so much better if you have a safe, non-toxic, non-regulated material. So the CTO of every company gets this. The CTO of every company says, oh man, if we could make our products have less impact on human health and the environment, we would just be so profitable. And then they look at their scientists and they know that none of those scientists have ever had a course that taught them how to do this. So wanting to do it, it's not the same thing as actually being able to do it. So we have so many approaches in sustainability, responsible care, safe and sustainable by design, resilience, systems thinking, limits to growth, UN SDGs, circular economy, biomimicry, ecology of commerce, cradle to cradle, planetary boundaries, and yes, green chemistry, all these approaches. What makes me sad is in our polarized society today, especially the way that our whole society is organized, I just get heartbroken when someone says this is the better approach and this is rubbish and this is good and this is bad and this approach is good and this approach is bad. Oh my God, do we really have to do that? If somebody wakes up in the morning and says, I like this approach, instead of being some idiot that tells them why they're wrong, why not instead embrace one another, find out what our passions are, and find out how to work together to mutually support one another? One approach doesn't have to be better than another. They're all important. They're all necessary. And instead of criticizing, what we need to do is understand what are the attributes of each one of them and see how they all work together. That's the only way forward. And so we don't have to have the which approach is the emerging victorious approach. Right? That's really cool. So how does green chemistry fit into all of these things? So the way that I look at it is chemistry is a 360-degree sphere that every time someone invents something or discovers something, the sphere gets bigger and bigger and bigger. When someone says chemistry is a mature science, I kind of giggle. We're just on the verge of awesome. We're just starting in chemistry. And so all those books, all those approaches, what they're doing is say, okay, if you're going to do chemistry, what we really prefer it to do is this, and we may call it sustainable chemistry, we may call it safe chemistry, or circular chemistry, or clean chemistry, or regenerative chemistry. And these are important. And these are really, really things that we should embrace. But what are they doing? These here are telling us how do we measure? How do we characterize? How do we document these things that we want? Notice I didn't put green chemistry here because that's how green chemistry fits into this thing is it's not a way to measure, monitor, and characterize. It is a mechanistic science that changes the shape of chemistry so that everything we do fits whatever box you want to tick, whether it's clean chemistry, safe chemistry, whatever. But if you don't have the mechanistic science of how to do it, it just doesn't matter. So this is a clarion call for diversity. We need new eyes, new ideas into this process. I would argue if 50 years ago, the chemical sciences were more inclusive and respective of diversity, someone would have more likely said, you're using what? To do what? But because we didn't have that, we're in the boat that we're in. And so we need to change the face of what chemistry means. All right. And so when we think of the efforts in sustainability, think of all the things people are doing in sustainability. There are most of the people in sustainability are talking about why. We've got to deal with climate change. We've got to deal with ocean plastics. We've got to deal with petroleum spills. We've got to deal with toxics in the environment. Then there are a little bit less people, but there's a lot of people working on what? We should do the UN SDGs. We should do circular economy. But what we have the fewest people doing is the how. And that's where green chemistry fits in. The why and the what are important. But if only you do the why and the what, all you're doing is making everybody sad. If you don't do the how, and try to come up with ways of not doing these things, we're in a certain, and so unfortunately, the minority of people working in sustainability are doing the most important aspect, which is inventing the solutions. But you can't do that just by wanting to. You need to have the fundamental skills. So I look at the chemical sciences as a toolbox. We have a whole bunch of different draws: carbon bond forming reactions, oxidations, reductions, hydroxylations. If we can design a molecule, it doesn't violate some fundamental law, we can probably make it. But if you imagine a green chemistry toolbox that does the same thing, told you it's about 90% empty. I believe an individual, a company who understands better performance, better cost, oh, by the way, better for human health and environment, of course, they're going to open up the green chemistry toolbox first. But 90% of the time, they're going to see an open draw. So what do? They say, okay, what is it going to cost for the gloves and the masks and the goggles and the lawyers? And they go to the traditional toolbox and they build that into the problem because they don't have the time and the luxury to invent. Invention is a tricky thing. So what we need is an army of people in academia and in research institutes trying to fill this toolbox so that when industry needs it, these tools are there. But we can't do it by wishing and dreaming and hoping. We need to have the skill set to invent these things. So realizing that I needed to get more involved in the invention. Here I am, a full tenured professor of chemistry, full tenured professor of engineering. I resigned my academic duties to start an individual research institute, Warner Babcock Institute, Technology Greenhouse. And I wanted to show the world that green chemistry isn't just a philosophy, it is a way of being more efficient in the lab. So with a very small group of people, I started a research lab, and over the next 12 years, filed over 350 patents, have spun out a bunch of different companies, licensed a bunch of technologies to multinationals. And so what I want to do is I wanted to show that, hey, listen, I'm putting my family's mortgage, the education of my children at risk here by saying, listen, if I can't make a successful business out of doing this, then how am I going to convince the world that it's the most important thing to do? And so I would like to think that I've been pretty successful doing this. And I'm saying I could not have possibly done this without the principles of green chemistry. Let me give you a couple examples of some of the technologies that have been created, that my inventions have gone to make new companies. All right, so one of my inventions, one day I was thinking about insect sclerotization. When an insect gets bigger, it has to shed its exoskeleton, and over the course of a couple minutes, it turns hard and black. I'm looking at this and I'm saying there's something in nature that changes color. People color their hair with very toxic, nasty, unsustainable stuff. So I looked at the chemistry of this process, and it turns out it's a tyrosinase oxidative cascade, where tyrosine undergoes a series of enzymatic oxidations, and that's what causes that color. Okay, and I said, well, gee whiz, I didn't want to grind up dead bugs, so I found some seeds, velvet beans, that do the same thing. I designed an iron manganese catalyst, came up with a biosurfactant that's food grade, all these materials are food grade, bought a bunch of gray hair, and boom, it worked. Permanent, doesn't wash out, doesn't fade. But what's more interesting, it doesn't paint the hair. It's not coloring the hair per se. It's restoring the human pigment. And so I'm pretty gray. I put it in my hair. It goes back to the color my hair was before I turned gray. My friend with black hair, it goes black. My friend with brown hair, it goes brown. This is the same bottle. We put it in our hair, rinse it out, and it restores the human pigment. It undergoes the same biochemistry within the hair to repopulate. And just like normal colored hair doesn't fade, doesn't wash out, this doesn't, because it is it. And so I realized that in the same way we have a fingerprint, our hair, we have a hairprint. And so started a company called Hairprint, and for the last 7 years, maybe 8 years, this has now been direct to consumer, myhairprint.com. If you act quickly for $29.99, they'll throw in a set of knives. But could not have been done without the principles of green chemistry. Another example is this molecule, copper ATSM, is brick dust. Okay, and so using my science of non-covalent derivatization, I was able to customize the bioavailability, get it so that it crosses the blood-brain barrier, and using mechanochemistry, manufactured GMP stuff, we started a pharmaceutical company called Collaborative Medicinal Development, and this is now in phase 3 clinical trials as one of the most promising opportunities for ALS. There's still a lot of hurdles to go. This isn't a done deal, but phase 3 clinical trials is a pretty cool place to be. And so fingers crossed, there's no way I could have done this without the principles of green chemistry. Another example is there's hundreds of millions of miles of roads in the United States, billions in the world of asphalt. Okay, the sun and the air oxidize the surface of the asphalt, making it brittle and hard. So we repave the surfaces of asphalt about 10% every year. So about every 10 years, we're recycling that. And so, but the problem is this brittle, hard, oxidized asphalt is kind of useless. It has to either go into a landfill or some very, lousy use for it. So it's not economically feasible. And so what happens is that roads get paved with new asphalt and new aggregate, petroleum-based material. And I said, why can't I invent the street Zamboni? Why couldn't I create a truck that digs up the asphalt, processes it, and paves it and just keeps going down the road? And so to demonstrate this, back about 10 years ago, if I'm willing to put stuff in my hair, I'm willing to dig up my driveway. We dig up my driveway. I go back to the plant. I crawl up a ladder. I add the catalyst, go back, bring it back. The workers, come and they go, oh my God, this is amazing. They pave my driveway. It outperforms industry standard. 100% recycled material, paves at a lower processing temperature. The additive is literally plant-based edible stuff, non-toxic, no virgin materials. So started a company called Collaborative Aggregates and have two products. I wanted to call the product Entropy Mix, but the marketing people said, oh, we can't do that. So I said, how about Delta S? They said, oh, okay, don't tell them. And so Delta S is a catalyst that goes into the pavement, and Delta Mist is an aqueous dispersion that goes on. There's no way I would have invented this and been able to anticipate these impacts without understanding the 12 principles of green chemistry. Another example, this is one of my favorite artists, MC Escher. You look in the sky, there's the birds, you see the fish below. It's an optical illusion. When does the fish stop being fish? When do the birds stop being birds? It's kind of weird. I realized that in biology and nature, many interfaces are fuzzy like this. They aren't discrete lines. You look at electron transfer across a mitochondrial matrix, and really all these reversible little fuzzy steps. So I said, could I design a semiconductor and synthesize a semiconductor that slowly, like an Escher painting, turned into a chromophore? And then through self-assembly and things, that slowly turned into an electrolyte. And I started making photovoltaic systems. Turns out it is the highest efficiency photovoltaic system in history. All right. And so it turns out it works really, really well. And it works really well in indoor conditions. And so we started a company called Ambient Photonics, and the company Amazon and others have invested over $100 million. And now we're in Santa Cruz, California, manufacturing this technology. And it's for anything indoor that's powered by a battery. Instead of changing the battery, you put this on it and it's constantly charging that battery. And so there's a lot of photovoltaic technologies out there. This one's green chemistry. It's non-toxic, environmentally benign, and it's recyclable. And so could not possibly have been able to anticipate the bumps in the road of this unless I use the principles of green chemistry. My last example is, the sunglasses, you go outside, they turn dark, you go inside, they turn clear. Well, I realized that if I instead made it hydrophilic and hydrophobic, I could capture and release water. So I could make a system that when the light is shined on, it's absorbent of water. And then when the light is turned off, it repels the water, and have this work in a millisecond time frame so that in a shadow of a windmill, I can have a film that capture, release, capture, release, capture, release, and have the water just extract from very arid environments. So started a company called Mist Miner to commercialize this, all non-toxic, environmentally responsible technologies. One of the things I like to say is the photon is one of the greenest reagents. And so this is another example that couldn't have been done without the principles of green chemistry. So hopefully this kind of gives you a sense of why I do it. Now, there are thousands of people in the field of green chemistry. I am just one of thousands of people, and I do not like the concept of father of green chemistry. There are fathers, mothers, grandfathers, grandparents, aunts, uncles, everything else. I'm just one of so many people, and I'm just so blessed to be part of this amazing community. But what keeps me awake at night now is this image here, that we still have so long to go. How are we going to get the rest of these things invented? And I think society just doesn't understand. What do people do that have been inspired? If we teach people and give people the skills that they need, they turn information into knowledge. And with that knowledge, turn materials into products. And those products are the food and the medicines and the housing and the energy that now supports those people. We are in a very complex ecosystem where the critical and most important part of this is education. That if you don't put that little asterisk next to the people, if we don't inspire people and give them the intellectual tools, this can't happen. And what happens is now worse than that. We could keep doing it the way we have, but then we end up with this stuff. And so we need to change this. It's just there's no alternative. But the problem that we face is that society still doesn't quite get us. Society doesn't really understand what we chemists do. Okay, imagine a Beyonce concert or a football match or Times Square. Now let's look at every object in these pictures. And let's draw a line to them and say, well, they're probably a patent behind all these things and some companies making it. Behind that, there's a bunch of academic publications. Now let's imagine we look at the faces of the people on these patents and of these papers. I would argue that they don't all look like old, white, gray-haired people like me. There's a little bit of everybody out there. Now, it's not an appropriate representation of our population. We need to really desperately improve those numbers, but it's also a mistake to not see that we're all there. And I don't think people understand that the person coaching your kid's soccer team might have invented an additive in your toothpaste, that someone you randomly pass on the street might have invented the diabetes drug that your dad takes, or someone in your house of worship might have invented an adhesive in the shoe you wear, or someone that rushes past you in the airport might have invented a coating, or anything. We're everywhere, but we're invisible to people. How do we help do that? We need to change the relationship, and that comes with education. And that's why the most important thing that I'm involved in, and I'm so happy that you're all on this call, because in my opinion, the most important thing we all can do is join with Beyond Benign and change the way we teach chemistry. And so Beyond Benign has a lot of different programs in K through 12 and communities and stuff like that. But one of the most important programs with Beyond Benign is the Green Chemistry Commitment. And the green chemistry commitment, and I know everybody on this call is familiar with this, is asking universities to find a way to bring this into the curriculum. All right. And so it's not easy, right? But the thing is that now this is old, there are 170 almost signers of the green chemistry commitment. And every one of these universities have approached it a different way. One might have a seminar program. One might have a standalone class. One might have it in the organic lab. One might have it in inorganic lab. Might one have it in analytical. It's a mistake to think that green chemistry is just synthesis. It's every aspect of the chemical enterprises. And what's beautiful is the diversity of how all these people have done this. And this community is so giving and sharing that if a new organization comes into this, they don't have to reinvent the wheel. They learn what other people are doing and they will share and help. And so hopefully as we keep going, we build better tools and we help people more and more and more. But that's what's at stake now, is that the desire is there, okay? People need sustainability. The next generation of chemists desperately want to do it, but we need to provide them the tools to do it. And I think the green chemistry commitment is the best way. So I hope that this has been a useful kind of framing. It's a long-winded, framing of this thing, but hopefully it really gets you grounded on where did this green chemistry thing come from? What is it? How does it relate to the education of chemists, and how the green chemistry commitment and Beyond Benign can help you? So I thank you so very much for having the patience to listen to me, and please let me know if there's any way I can help. So I'll hand that over to you now, Juliana. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John, for everything. It was amazing, as usual. Our chat was going bananas here with like articles, people sharing things during your talk, and it's amazing. So I'm just gonna follow up with whatever John said in terms of the green chemistry commitment and how you can participate before we go to our question period. So as John says, this is the green chemistry commitment, is a green chemist a commitment to higher education institutions to include green chemistry. Doesn't have to be perfect. You're doing it your own way with your own resources and the way that works for you, your institution. So it's the way we see that we're increasing the accessibility to green chemistry. And we often say that this is a two-way commitment. So as university commits to start putting green chemistry education into the curriculum at Beyond Benign, we also commit to supporting this inclusion. So we have a lot of different ways that people can include green chemistry, and some of those have been highlighted on our website. But it can be a revision of whatever is going on, creating something completely different, or also using the resources outside of the chemistry department. So we also published a paper recently as a celebration of the 25th anniversary of green chemistry in the Green Chemistry Journal. So if you want to check how our signers are doing this, please, I think Chloe is going to add the link in the chat as well. So in terms of the impact, the community of the green chemists institutions that are part of the commitment, they are everywhere in the world. So you can see a lot of in the US, because this is where Beyond Benign was created and everything. But then now we're reaching all parts of the world in more than 16 countries worldwide. And this slide is also outdated. I think we have 169 now institutions everywhere who are part of the commitment. And we estimate that we're reaching over 3,300 faculty in the community and almost 100 million, 1 million students, 900,000. So in terms of what the institutions are doing, signing the GCC is not only associated with reducing waste in the lab, but also increasing the green chemistry teaching practices, but also including green chemistry and broader sustainability adoption in these institutions outside of the chemistry departments, which is really cool. In terms of participating, we're going to send you these documents after the event, and you can also find those in our website. But the idea is like you'll see this form, and you have like what the department is and which institution. We also, if your institution doesn't have a chemistry department, we also accept the signature of the department that's responsible for teaching students about chemistry. So, and we also need the signature of the chair and also one administrator. So this is like the main signing form of the green chemistry commitment. And we also have a second form, which is basically getting the information of the person who is going to be the liaison or the champion of the green chemistry commitment program in your department, and which we're going to communicate all the different opportunities that Beyond Benign has. So this is mainly the signing process. Share this information, download the forms, send it my way. And if you have also any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Also, the higher education team would be happy to answer them. We're always here. And in summary, any institution that teaches green chemistry in the higher education level can participate of the Green Chemistry Commitment Program. There are no fees associated. We are a nonprofit. We try to support you by partnering with the industry. It's also a diverse program, non-prescriptive. We're not going to come at your door and ask what you're doing. We just want to support you to implement this change. And in terms of opportunities, we do have some the Green Chemistry Education Challenge Awards. So we partner with industry to support the institutions. So currently we have $1,000 to $10,000 to institutions who are part of the Green Chemistry Commitment Program for any project that is related to green chemistry awareness. And the deadline is June 30th. So if you're a signing institution that wants to try and apply for a Green Chemistry Education Awards, please feel free to do so. If you're not an institution yet but want to do so, please send us all of the forms and we'll do that. And also, I'd like to invite you to this open access opportunity together with the American Chemical Society Green Chemistry Institute, the ACSGCI. We created a platform for green chemistry. So it's basically this virtual hub where the community can talk, discuss, collaborate, upload the green chemistry resources in only one place. And we also have job boards and industry connections. And we have also really cool forums where you can talk to the community and get to know more people and network and collaborate. So the QR code is going to take you to the GCTLC, and you can create your own profile. And the good part is that we have a raffle going on. So if you create your profile, you can win like up to $1,000 gift card, which is really nice. So please join us and sign up for the GCTLC today. So these are some quotes of the Green Chemistry Commitment signers that we had in our previous report. And my favorite one is like the community where all are welcome and valued. And I think this is what we want to do with the Green Chemistry Commitment Program here and give the support to all of you. So a big thank you to all of you for being here with us in the info session. If you have any questions, please reach out to us about the Green Chemistry Commitment. Also, this QR code is going to take you to our newsletter. We're always sending some newsletters about opportunities and what the community is doing. So I'm going to stop sharing.